Have you ever thought about how you'd give an IQ test to a robot? I mean, it's not going to be about vocabulary or math problems. Today, we're diving into a really unique test that was made specifically for artificial intelligence, and it gets into some deep questions about logic, reality, and what it means to actually understand something. Let's see what it takes to stump a supercomputer. So why even bother testing a machine's IQ? Well, here's the fundamental problem we're running into. An AI can absolutely crush a human at complex calculations, but the moment you ask it to use practical, real-world common sense or understand abstract ideas, it just hits a wall. This test is designed to poke right at that weak spot. And this quote from our source material just nails it. This huge gap between technical skill and, practical reasoning. That's the biggest hurdle on the path to what we call artificial general intelligence, or AGI. An AI that can actually think and understand like a human. This whole test is about exploring that gap. Okay, let's get into the first round of questions. This section is all about reality, truth, and logic. And hey, I really want you to play along here. See how your own intuition stacks up against the test logic. You ready? So the absolute has clear limits. Okay, but is the relative always subjective? What do you think? The source actually says this is false. See, relative just means you're comparing it to something else, and that can be a totally objective comparison. Subjective is about your personal feelings. It's a small difference in words, but a huge difference in meaning. A classic philosophical debate. Is truth just a matter of opinion? This test says nope, false. The idea here is that truth is what it is, completely separate from us. What's subjective is how we see it or how we adapt to it. All right, let's look at two sides of the same coin here. On the left, is objectivity completely pure with zero subjectivity? And on the right, can something subjective, like a feeling, become an objective fact? Well, the source says false to the first one. Our perspective always colors things a little bit. But for the second one, the answer is true. A subjective experience, if it's observed and verified over and over, can absolutely become an objective fact. We've all heard this one since middle school math, right? But is it always true in the real world? The test says false. Just picture trying to find the shortest path between two mountain peaks. It's not a laser straight line through the mountain, is it? It's a path that curves with the land. This test really cares more about what's practical than what's purely theoretical. This one gets into the real nitty-gritty of logic. So, does a paradox have a contradiction? The answer is false. A contradiction is something impossible, like this is a circle and it's also a square. It just negates itself. A paradox, on the other hand, is more like a weird loop, like the phrase, this statement is false. It doesn't cancel itself out. It just kind of affirms two different states at the same time. So what does it really mean for two things to be separate? The source says this statement is false. Think about it. If you slice a cake, you get pieces, but they're still all parts of the same cake. True separation would be like the cake and the concept of gravity. They exist in completely different contexts. And this next one builds right on top of that last idea. The source says this is true. Making parts of a whole doesn't truly separate them. It just means you're looking at the whole thing from a limited angle, kind of like looking at one single puzzle piece instead of the whole picture. Okay, this one is a bit of a mind-bender. If truth is just what is, does that mean the concepts of true and false are themselves truths? The test says, yeah, true. The reasoning is that the very idea of true and false are real things that exist in our understanding of reality. All right, now we've got a multiple choice question. What is the absolute most fundamental definition of justice? Is it about things being proportional, or is it about putting things in their correct order of priority? The source goes with the second option. It argues that real justice is all about understanding the proper importance of things. Whew, you made it through round one. Now we are heading into some even weirder territory. Round two is going to tackle concepts that really push our brains to the edge. We're talking about infinity, existence, and the whole idea of cause and effect. This one just sounds wrong, doesn't it? More freedom means more choices, obviously. Well, the source says this is false, but there's a really interesting catch. True freedom gives you the wisdom to see which choices are actually good ones and which are just noise. So it helps you focus on the best choices, which can make it feel like you have fewer options overall. Okay, a big philosophical one here about eternity. If something is truly endless, could it have had a starting point? The source gives a very direct answer on this one. True. If it's eternal, it has to be uncreated. Can you have two different infinities? The source says false, and the logic is pretty cool. By definition, something that's infinite has no limits. So if you had a second infinite thing, there'd be no boundary between them. They would just merge and become one single, all-encompassing infinity. Following that same logic, if you have two things that are both eternal, no beginning, could one be a piece of the other? The answer here is true. Each one would be its own fundamental thing, not just a component of something else. This is a classic logic puzzle. If A causes B and B causes A, are they a self-contained system? The source says false. Think about it. If they both depend on each other and neither one is the ultimate starting point, then something else must have kicked off their cycle in the first place. This one feels a little more down to earth. If something has happened, even just one time, is it still impossible? The test gives a simple answer. True. The fact that it happened is all the proof you need that it was, in fact, possible. Okay, let's circle back to infinity. Is it a finished, complete whole, or is it just unlimited potential? The source picks option A. And this lines up perfectly with what we saw earlier. If infinity is a complete and total thing, then two of them can't exist separately. They just merge into one. So let's apply that idea to something we all know, numbers. Can you have multiple, separate, infinite sets of numbers? Well, based on the logic we've been following, the answer has to be false. One infinite set would just swallow up the other, making them one big set. And for our final question, when something vanishes, where does it go? Does it just pop into nothingness? The test concludes that this is false. And the reasoning is actually pretty profound. There is only existence. Things don't just disappear from existence. They just change their form within it. So after all those brain twisters, what's the big takeaway? Well, these questions really shine a light on where AI is at right now. True intelligence, it seems, isn't just about processing mountains of data. It's about getting the context, understanding the gray areas, and asking why, not just computing what. And for now, that's where human intuition still has a serious edge. And that really leaves us with one last big question to chew on. If an AI could one day pass this test with flying colors, nailing every question and explaining the logic perfectly, would it actually be thinking? Or would it just be the most incredible simulation of thought we've ever built? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me.